Welcome to Humanitarian Horizons. I am your host, Christina DiArcangelo. Today is one that I feel deeply in my spirit, because when we look around at the world, at what's happening across the nations, in our own communities, even inside our homes, it's clear that we are being tested. We are living in a time where fear, division, and moral decay seem to have taken root. Faith is being mocked. Believers are being silenced, killed, and even acts of hatred are occurring. Even against people gathering to worship God are becoming all too common. So today, I want to talk to you about what it means to be courageous about your faith, to practice your faith, to share your faith, to live in God's presence boldly, without shame and without fear. Because if there was a time to stand in his light, it is certainly now. Look what's been happening in 2025. Bombings, shootings, fires set intentionally in places of worship, while people are inside praying. These aren't just headlines. These are wounds on the soul of humanity. And here we are in the United States, a nation founded under the principles of freedom and faith. We're seeing something alarming and a quiet erosion of our moral compass and civil rights. We are promised freedom of religion, yet believers are being censored, ridiculed, and told to keep their faith to themselves. Meanwhile, people who reject God entirely are encouraged to speak, to act without a conscience, and in some cases, even commit crimes with little or no accountability. Where is the justice? Where is the responsibility? Where is the reverence for human life and the sacredness of God's creations? These are not just political questions. These are spiritual questions. Because when we remove God from our lives, from our schools, from our decisions, and from our institutions, what's left? Confusion, chaos, violence, and the normalization of sin. As parents, as leaders, as human beings, we must ask ourselves, what are we modeling for our children when they see hatred going unpunished, when they see lies rewarded and truth silenced, when they see people mocked for praying or punished for standing up for what's right? What are we teaching them about being courageous? Children don't learn from what we say. They learn from what we do. So if standing firm in our faith, speaking truth, even when it's uncomfortable, forgiving when it's hard, loving when the world tells us to hate, that's how we raise a generation of warriors for God. But if we stay silent, if we hide our faith because we're afraid of offending someone or being criticized, then we're letting the darkness win. Now is the time to be bold in our belief, not aggressive, not judgmental, but rooted in love and truth. When you live in God's presence, you walk differently, you think differently, you see the world through the eyes of compassion, wisdom, and not fear and confusion. Faith isn't something that we just practice on Sundays. It's something that we live every day, and how we speak, how we treat others, and how we stand up for the righteousness when it is unpopular. God never promised us comfort. He promised us strength. He didn't promise us an easy path. He promised his presence on that path. And when we invite him into our lives, really invite him, everything changes. We find peace in chaos. We find clarity in uncertainty. We find courage in the face of fear. Courage doesn't mean that you're not afraid or that you've never been afraid. It means that you choose faith in spite of fear. Every time you share your testimony, every time you speak the truth with grace, every time you refuse to compromise your morals, even when it costs you something, you're planting seeds of courage in others. And right now, the world needs more of that, because courage is contagious. And when one stands up for faith, others find the strength to do so. Let's not forget, freedom of faith is not a privilege. It is a right, a God-given, constitutionally protected right. But if we only preserved, if we exercise it, if we allow fear or apathy to silence us, then freedom slips away quietly, subtly, one compromise at a time. We must be alert, engaged, and prayerful. We must remind our leaders that faith is not the problem, it's the solution, that our communities are stronger when we center our lives around God's truth, not human ego or a political agenda. And as believers, we must remember that our fight is not against people. It's against the spiritual darkness that is trying to divide, destroy, and deceive. So we fight not with hatred, but with prayer, not with violence, but with conviction, not with despair, but with hope. If you're listening today and you've been afraid to talk about your faith, I want you to know this. God chose you for this moment in history. You're not meant to hide your light. You're meant to shine it. And yes, the world may judge you. And yes, people may misunderstand you. But when you stand for truth, when you walk with God, when you trust in his plan, even when it doesn't make sense, that's when you become unstoppable. Let's return to being a people who prays boldly, lives righteously, and loves deeply. Let's bring God back into our conversations, our families, our schools, our workplace, and our justice system. Because if we truly want change, it doesn't start in politics. It starts in your heart. It starts in faith, and it starts with us. And today, I leave you with this message. Be courageous in your faith. Walk in God's presence. And remember, even in the darkest moments, his light cannot be extinguished. Thank you for joining me today. I am Christina DiArcangelo. Stay strong, stay faithful, and keep shining his light around the world.